Is the green screen gonna pick up on my makeup? That would be very embarrassing. Hi, I'm here making a video again because I hate myself. And speaking of self-loathing, that's a topic inside Big Mouth Season 4. If you haven't watched it already, I made an analysis on Seasons 1 to 3 of Big Mouth and how the series touches on gender and relationships. Of course, I made that in anticipation of Season 4. This season was actually really intense and I can't wait to get into it. I just want to say a shout out to today's sponsor, Mustard.
I wanna end me.
I actually want to talk about how this season actually focused so much on anxiety, especially on Nick. It was like a big part of Nick's arc, and he had like the biggest arc of the season. But of course, Tito, the anxiety mosquito, bit most characters on the show, essentially making it a main character this season. I think they made a good animal choice because a mosquito is like always on you, trying to like suck you off. What? It's so pesky, and when it's in like large amounts, it can bother you till no ends. I think the topic of anxiety is something that, of course, a lot of people can relate to. The mosquito and like the scenes where it would be like full of anxiety inspired this makeup. Also, this is like the depression kitty's tale. Anyway, that's not important. I want to talk about Nick. So I think it's very interesting that I actually stated in my previous analysis that Nick was extremely insecure because this season, Nick's arc is pretty much defined by the phrase, "You're a bad person who can't." I think the topics of being a bad person and being incapable are actually very instilled into Nick's arc. I think him being insecure about, like being inadequate, especially like in the shower scene, or just feeling insecure like at the stand-up show, even though he's always felt pretty cool before and it's always been looming in the back of his mind, like, am I actually funny? But the bad person part actually hit home because this was the first time that he actually felt bad because of what he did with Andrew, the whole Missy situation. The season really makes you feel bad for Nick because he actually gets anxiety and he's questioning himself, like, am I a bad person? And his anxiety keeps telling him that he is. Him and Andrew reconcile when Andrew stops being a dick to him because he takes a really big poop. I'll get into that later. But he stops being anxious as soon as he gets on the bus and he leaves, but he starts getting anxious again after his fight with Jesse, and that's when he has that horrible dream. I'll get into episode 6 later. He gets flashbacks about the dream and like going after Jesse and just feeling like a horrible person in general. And when he goes to the sorority house where he has that hallucinogenic period where everyone kind of had actually like an emotional revelation, he actually has the opposite. He has like a breakdown. In the show, his evil part takes over and kills Nick Birch and is overtaken by Nick Starr. I'll get into that in a bit. Let's discuss the rest of the season. So of course the first 3 episodes are based at camp. We meet Seth Goldberg, voiced by Seth Rogen. He was a casting choice that just made sense for the show. Andrew befriends him and they become better friends. Then they become friends with Nick, and Nick is of course extremely jealous about this. There's also another character, Natalie. Natalie is a character who is trans and she hasn't been at the camp since she transitioned. Jesse is kind of mad at her at first because last summer she had called her fire crotch, and Connie convinces her to be like, hey, she's probably very alone. This girl needs a friend. So Jesse actually does become friends with her and they become like the best friends. I really love their dynamic. I think it was such a cool friendship. I think like they were the most compatible people to be friends, honestly. And of course they tell us all about Natalie's transition in the first episode. I personally think they did a good job. They got Josie Toda, an actress who is actually transgender, to voice Natalie. I really do hope that this time, unlike with the pansexual situation, that they actually did a lot of research and talked to transgender people to see how they could portray the story, which is an important story. Like, there are people who deserve this representation, especially kids who are going through this. So I think they did a great job at her not only telling her transition story, but as a character. I really like Natalie. I think she was very enjoyable. There's a moment that I could relate to, even though, I don't want to be that person that's like, oh, I can relate to that, when it's like probably more like, of a trans issue. But Seth shows interest in her and they make out, which is great. It's like a lovely moment, right? I think in general on this show you barely ever see 2 people that really like each other make out, but they make out and Seth is like embarrassed that he likes her because she is trans. And of course I'm very happy with the way she reacted. She was like, fuck you, piece of shit. I just wanted to say that like I've also been there. Like, my first relationship in middle school was literally with a boy who was like, okay, we'll be together but no one can know we're together. All right, so of course like that hit pretty hard. But of course this is kind of a different issue because I think that's something a lot of queer people go through. Maybe someone doesn't want anyone else to know that they're interested in you because of your identity. It sucks. Andrew doesn't have that much of a deep story. He serves more as like someone who's just mad at Nick all the time during the first 2 episode, and I wouldn't say rightfully so because he didn't have to be such a dick, but of course he was mad because of the whole Missy situation. And then we learn it's because he's been constipated all summer, and they show us in the grossest way possible that he is. Like, I get it, poop madness, but Jesus Christ, that was all very graphic. Nick actually realizes that Andrew is also going through something. Of course they make up and they go back to school and everything is fine and normal. In the 4 stories about hand stuff episode, Andrew tells us about the Glaubermann Method, which is 17 steps he takes before he pleasures himself. I actually found this very interesting and I can relate to it, not in the context of self-pleasure, but I don't know if any of y'all have ever felt like, you know, if you do something wrong, something else will be affected. Like, for example, you know, if I don't make this shot, you know, like throwing this paper into the trash can over there, I'll fail this test. Like, you know, 2 completely unrelated things. That's literally what Andrew felt with the Glaubermann Method. If he didn't do it correctly, you know, check the log a billion times, grab the right amount of tissue paper, he felt like something bad was gonna happen, and coincidentally, he didn't obey the Glaubermann Method, and almost immediately his father receives a call that his grandfather has died. And of course he thinks it's related, and this leads us to a horrible moment. Andrew self-pleasures himself at his grandfather's funeral in front of the casket. Another moment that should have just not left the writing room. He tells his parents the reason why, because everyone finds out. I've talked about how Andrew has a dysfunctional family where his father's an asshole and his mother just doesn't know how to help him. Even though she's kind of like, oh look, you didn't kill your grandfather, she does let him know that just death is all around. So this kind of plants a seed of anxiety into Andrew that he's always had, but like it made it even worse. In the sorority house, his fear is that he dies like a million times, and like a million times. His breakthrough is that he can't really do anything about it. His mother does tell him that death is everywhere and unavoidable, and as much as that is scary, it's also very true. You can't do anything about the fact that you will die someday, and you don't have control over that. All you can do is break. And he also touches himself, but we're not gonna go through that. Now Jessie, wow, her story really hit home this time. I think I've said it on this channel that I have had anxiety, and a lot of that anxiety growing up was like due to my grades and feeling dumb. I've always felt like other people knew more than me or were more capable than me. So she meets this boy who's like 2 years older than her. She tries to mold herself into maybe what he likes, and she kind of acts different, and of course Nick tells her this. He kind of persuades her into, how do I put this lightly, giving her a hand. And when he drops his pants, he laughs. And I think this is a pretty relatable moment, you know, like penises are funny. But the bigger thing here is that he wanted to manipulate her using the idea of blue balls. That every time they made out, like he would get blue balls and he couldn't really do anything about it, which of course, ever since I've been a teenager, thankfully I've heard the phrase that a boner is no need to go to a hospital. Of course, he tries to manipulate her and be like, hey, like I have blue balls, so you have to take care of this. This is your fault. You turned me on so much that you're the one that has to deal with this. Of course, that's manipulation to the first degree, and that really hit home. I think we've all been there where like guys try to make you feel guilty. It's also worth noting that Tito and the depression kitty left as soon as she met Michelangelo. I think this was a sign of like we tend to forget all our worries when we meet this thing that's giving us like all this serotonin, and he's like so cool and so hot, and I just forgot all about my problems. The depression kitty gives us a pretty good wake-up call, which of course you shouldn't do. That also hit home for me, and I'm pretty sure it hit home for a lot of girls. Probably a lot of us have felt like we should just love this one boy and this boy is our only source of happiness, which of course isn't the truth. Then of course she tells Nick all about how bad it's actually going for her. Of course Nick then tries to kiss her at this moment and she feels bad. She doesn't really understand what's going on, but of course Nick shouldn't have kissed her in that moment. Not that I couldn't see this coming or that it was weird, but oh my god, Nick likes Jessie. You know, season 1 showed us that they worked better as friends instead of together, but I think this season really solidified like his crush on Jessie, which I think is very cute. And of course story-wise, as a viewer, I think it's like, oh my god, like this gives it a bit of more seriousness to the show. Not like seriousness like it's a serious show, more like these characters have like a real story. I don't know if that makes sense. After she burst out the funeral, her parents agree that she should stay in Westchester, not go back to the city, and her mom finds her a therapist. And I think it's so nice that like she actually misses her mom. And Connie's all, you know, like I've always told you that your mom is like so sweet and I'm gonna miss her so much, when of course in the first episode she already made her hate her mom for no reason. The anxiety mosquito actually lets her know that like Nick has also been going through anxiety. In the sorority house moment, like an asylum type of thing, she's like extremely afraid at the asylum. The Gratitoad, I love this, voiced by Zach Galifianakis, actually demonstrates a way to kind of manage your anxiety. I don't know if they like consulted like an actual psychologist or anything for this. I don't know if this is actual advice that therapists give to their patients, but I think it's actually so great to have that character that teaches you how to be grateful for things. I don't know if that's good advice, but I actually am probably gonna take that as good advice, low-key. And I think it worked really well for the characters. Of course, Jessie learns that having an attitude of gratitude is really good, and she practices it, and that's how she feels better, and eventually that is how she helps Nick out in the end. Now Missy, of course, we had learned that she was going to meet the black side of her family. It's pretty appropriate that they changed the voice actress for this and everything, and there were a few funny ass Easter eggs or just like fourth wall breaks or things like that. But of course, I found it great that they discuss Missy's racial identity, because I can't really attest to this, but I can imagine that for people of color going through puberty and growing up, unlike for us white people, it must be an issue hard to go through. And I know we all love Missy as like this dorky character, and of course Nick Kroll actually said that the idea of Missy at the beginning was that she was a dorky girl who just happened to be black, but of course you can't have a black character without really addressing her blackness. I personally think they did a good job. Again, I can't be the one to really say that, because I think the voices that we should listen to, of course, are black people's voices, specifically black women. You know what? I'm actually very interested and can take notes from Missy's mom, because of course Missy is mixed. Her mom is white, her dad is black, and her mom, we see that is actually a white feminist if you think about it, because she teaches Missy a lot of really important things, you know, about her body, protesting, but she doesn't teach her about race, which is very important if you're a feminist. She tries to subdue the fact that her father is being racially profiled at the TSA, and also calls Missy's braids when she gets them not manageable. If I ever end up having, you know, a mixed child, I would definitely educate myself and not be like Monica trying to not teach her about what it's like to be black. I think it's very important that you do that with your kid. There's literally like this story that I saw that was kind of like a kid being approached by the parents being like, hey, we have to talk to you about something, and the kid was like, is this a sex talk? And they were like, no, this is the police brutality talk, which of course a lot of parents have to have with their children. So if you're white and you have a black child, this is so extremely important. You can't have a black child without teaching them about what it's like to be a black person. Even if you're not black yourself, you have to educate yourself and try to find help from other people that can help you from their own experiences, in this case black people. So in the second episode, Missy changes her style. Like, instead of wearing her overalls, she starts wearing just like a t-shirt and jeans, things that make her feel like a young woman, you know. Of course, she goes to the hair salon and gets braids. Her white mom washes her hair with a 6-in-1 that works as a toothpaste and soap detergent. Of course, it speaks to white mothers who don't properly take care of their black child's hair. There's also the moment in the 9/11 episode where she and Devon, one of the other black kids at Bridgeton, talk about code switching, which she has never heard about before. I think this is, you know, a big topic for black people, where within their own community they speak one way, but probably, like Missy herself says, to defend herself or to go through life, they switch to, you know, white norms in white society to be amicable. He meets up with Lena, of course, and she kind of rejects this. She says that why should they conform to white norms when white people don't do the same? Of course, she's got a point with that. That whole conversation was very interesting, and Missy herself was like, this is a beautiful exchange of ideas. And Lena herself doesn't even conform to that, because when she's planning a date with a white girl, she notably, or at least to them notably, code switches. And the white girl actually says bust down. Embarrassing. She also faces backlash from Devin. Devin tells her she's never seen her as much of a real black girl, whatever that fucking means. And I'm very glad that Missy, being Missy, aka the best character in all of Big Mouth period, that was embarrassing. I'm criticizing the girl that said bust down, but I'm over here saying period. She of course responds to that and says that she is not the authority on blackness, and at the sorority house her fear is that she has to choose which identity she identifies most with. There's even like an Us reference, which is always so cool when they reference Jordan Peele movies because he's in the show. Of course, Missy realizes in the end that she doesn't have to choose. She can be whoever she wants, and she is all of those things that make up Missy are Missy. I love how also this is the moment where they change the voice actress. And wow, Ayo is actually so good at playing Missy. I had heard her like doing stand-up and stuff, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be a pretty cool change. But I think Ayo actually tried to sound a bit like Jenny Slate, and I think she did a really good job. And I can definitely get used to hearing her instead of Jenny play Missy. As for the other characters, loved Jay and Lola. Such an odd pair. but I actually ended up liking them. I actually have to say that for the 4 stories of hand stuff episode, that is the most sexual we have seen. The young teens of Big Mouth B. Kids will do that. Like, that is something that's gonna happen with kids at this age. They're hopefully not gonna go all the way, but they will do things similar to it. I think the analogy was pretty nice, like the dragon entering the castle. We don't really get a lot of Matthew at the beginning of the season, but his story kind of starts with, you know, his mom looking through his texts. I think it is so sad when you feel your parent being so different towards you because of a certain reason. Again, I know this is more a story on Matthew being gay, but growing up and realizing how different from your parents are and how sometimes they won't accept you for certain things hurts, and you're even left like thinking, should I be this way or should I agree with them because I don't want to lose my relationship to them. So of course when his mom tells him that he's going to burn in hell, that can be such a painful moment for LGBTQ plus kids, especially when they love their parents and don't want to lose that relationship to them. I cried hearing Matthew's song. When Matthew goes to the sorority, his fear is that he has to choose between his mother and his boyfriend, pretty much symbolizing, you know, his mother, his family, or the other symbolism, which is Aiden, you know, like his identity, how he really feels. And he ends up realizing that no matter what, neither of these people are gonna die. Like in the scene, he doesn't have to choose, he can just be himself. Matthew, of course, comes out to his dad. It's the bare minimum of what a parent can do, but he was fine, and he was like, I know you're gay. I think we all got this impression that his father was like very homophobic because he was very conservative, but he was actually fine with it. So Nick is overtaken by evil Nick, or Nick Star, and he is now a lost soul. Nick tries to go back in, and when he does, Nick Star is like an asshole. He is very cold and distant to everyone. He does not want to share anything with anyone, which of course we see in episode 6. The story of episode 6 is pretty interesting, and it touches like one of the most triggering things for me, which is like the end of the world situation where the world is going to blow up. And the story, of course, is that Nick has become a big star, and he finds out that the world is going to end soon and that he has to take someone on the ship to the moon. Jessie joins him. They go to the moon. He lets her know that he's a virgin because he's never found like physical or emotional intimacy with anyone, and she decides to blow the whole thing up. So now Nick is completely alone in space. That same Nick Star is the one we see at the end of the season that Nick battles. We see like the anxiety mosquito become huge, but we also see the gratitude become huge and try to essentially defeat the huge anxiety mosquito. I think this and episode 6 is where Big Mouth has kind of become very action based. I feel like the show is no longer very sitcom-y. It's just extremely like cartoon action type of thing. Like it's been that before, but now it's like way more, you feel me? Of course, the way Nick returns to his old self is by embracing that other side of him. It wasn't really said in the show, but the naked child inside the mind of Nick Star kind of reminds me of the term inner child. I feel like there's been a lot of Instagram posts and stuff like that talking about our inner child and how maybe our bad parenting or just something inside of us that hasn't been nurtured properly. So of course that inner child tells Nick if he's going to kill him or not, and he tells him, no, I have to embrace you because you're a part of me. And that, it really touched me because we all have things that we have to work on, you know, emotionally, mentally. That to me represented those parts. We can't all be fully good, and we can't be all fully bad either. You could see that afterwards at the end where like the depression kitty was really small and the anxiety mosquito was really small, because these things don't go away. Depression and anxiety don't go away, but you can definitely manage them through therapy, of course, through working on yourself, through self-awareness. As much as I felt really weird with the season, because to me this show is like a comfort show. If you're mentally stable, you probably haven't seen this show as much as I have. I watched it many times, so there's like so many references in this season that I have caught because I've watched the other episodes so much. This season hit really hard emotionally. It really hit some points that I was like, oh Jesus, that's me. It got way too relatable, and even to a fault, if I have to say so myself. I feel like the show, it was extremely funny. There were so many moments that I laughed out loud, but it just got way too deep in a weird way. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's supposed to make me uncomfortable, but Jesus Christ, I usually don't find things relatable, and this show was just extremely relatable to me. I think it touched on these topics really well. This was a great show for not just kids who are probably going through anxiety and depression at this early age, but also adults who probably didn't, and they really shouldn't see it as like a kids thing or like something that only kids can relate to. I think everyone at any age can relate to, oh, like I probably have anxiety, I probably have depression, I probably probably have some mental health issue. I'm not saying the show perfectly depicted this, but it definitely made a really good effort at showing what those things are like. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to sit here and discuss my favorite show on Netflix. I really hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe, do all that stuff. Even if you don't, thank you for just watching. And just let me know, did you like this season? I really like this season. Like, tell me your favorite parts or parts that you didn't like. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.